Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf Tez Zayin. Begin 10 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara first finishes up the discussion of the previous Daf, which we had introduced a conversation regarding halves. We had mentioned that when it comes to B'fanei Nechtam, we said a concept of Oy Kuli B'tekazcham, Oy Kulam B'kim Shtaras. You can't do half and half. Even though technically you would say, okay, if you say B'fanei Nechtam Chetziai, so you saw one of the witnesses, so great, have the other witness that you didn't see, have two witnesses. That should help. Two witnesses, nothing better than that. Said no, either you do it with B'fanei Nechtam, or do you keep Shtaras. You can't do halb. So that's what we're going to hold this conversation regarding different halachic areas of Gidul Chamisha, Mechitza Chamisha, Netilas Yadayim L'Chatzayin, and so the Gemara continues on that theme regarding this idea about doing things halfway. Each one really works on its own, but can you do it half and half? That's going to be the Gemara's discussion. Shiur's correspondence by Kalzich and Chesko, turn to Daf Chaim. I'm joining today's Daf. Let me discuss in today's Daf, which starts in the bottom of the Amud, when multiple people testify to the Ksiva and the Chasima, how that works out in regards to the verification of the get. And Machlik is regarding Shnaim Oymen B'faneinu Nechtav, Be'echad Oymen B'fanei Nechtam, if that would work, and why it would or wouldn't. There's two versions of Rabbi Yochanan of whether the Mishnah refers only to She'in HaGet Yoitze B'tachas Yidei Shnehem. Is it only when you have these two people that are saying something, but only one guy is delivering it, or is it even when the two guys who are saying something are from the shluchim, and still it's not going to work? Which that comes into the machlekes Rabba and Rava regarding the well-known machlekes in the beginning of Masechta, and maybe get Medin Sayam. So means they get from overseas. Is it because lafisha in biki and lishma, or is it lafisha in the relevancy is going to be regarding the case of Shnaim Shavi get Medin Sayam. When two people bring it from Medin Sayam, according to Rava, that's Eined Mitzur L'Kaima, well, it is Mitzur L'Kaima. And according to Rava, the Ein B'Kin L'Shma, well, that's still relevant, because you don't know what they said L'Shma, and that's going to come into that machlekes regarding the two different versions of Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. So we begin the current Daf Tez Zayin. We begin 10 lines down at the top of the Yomid. We're finishing up the conversation of the previous day, which we had mentioned this halacha of halves, which we had discussed. The last one was Netilas Yadayim L'Chatzayin, and now the Gemara brings Omer B'Yirmiyah. Since they said it's a Mishnah Masechta Zavin that says Haba Reishe V'Ruboy. If someone's head and the majority of his body, when he's tar, but Taisus adds on, he fills in the lines. The Gemara elsewhere explains it specifically if he became tar that day, which means he was tamei, became tar that day, because there's actually two different gezeras. But this one regarding Haba Reishe V'Ruboy, if someone's head and the majority of his body came b'mayim she'uvim, into drawn waters. So he went into, let's say, a pool, a bathtub, which are drawn waters. So that's one case. Or vatahar, a pure person, that it fell on his head, and the majority of his body, 3 lugin of drawn water. The tamei, either way, he's going to be tamei for truma until he immerses himself in a mikvah. Why you tamei by going into a pool or going into a bath? So this is actually one of the 18 decrees that they made, which is brought in the first parak of Masechta Shabbos, and they explain why did they make this gezerah? Because what happened is that their caves had putrid water that was their mikvahs. Now, after they were toivel, they would wash themselves in the fresh bath water. Now, they started saying that, well, this is not what purifies yourself. This is what purifies yourself. Because this was like, everyone has a good feeling going to the haisa mikvah, the good smell and the nicer. So people thought that's what purifies them. So they didn't realize that putrid bath, in the cave that you go into first, that's the real tahara. People don't know. People just go in. They think that this is that, and it's really not. So he made a gzeira that actually, if the day you go to the mikvah, you actually go subsequently into a bath, you're actually going to be tummy for truma. And you got to go back into the mikvah, so that people don't get confusing, because they might think that actually it's not the mikvah, it's actually the beautiful bath that afterwards that's what purifies it. But then subsequently made another gezerah for a tar person, that a shower of 3 lugin of water is poured over his head, because if you're not going to have that one, you're not going to have the other one. Because since they're very much similar, if we're going to let you take a shower, you might come to take the bath. If you take the bath, you might be convinced again that it's the bath that purifies you and not the mikvah. So therefore they said either one of those are going to make you tamei, so we don't run into this confusion. People are going to forget what actually is the tahara at all. But be that as it may, that's the prelude to the following question. So Boyer Birmir asked, what happens if a person goes halfway into the bath, and the other half, they use the shower head, and it falls on half of their body, 3 lugan of Mayim Shuvim. Now, what would the halacha be? Would you say that the person would become tamei because it's half and half? The Gemara said, take it, let it stand. It's not clear what the halacha would be. The nice you poured 3 lugan over half your body, and half your body went into the Mayim Shuvim. So essentially, really doing both, but by a combination. The Gemara says, let it stand. It's not clear what the halacha is going to be in that case. A similar type of question, but actually the other way around regarding purification. Amra Papa. Papa says, Arei Amru, the halacha is brought that Bal Keri Chayla, a sick person specifically, who had a seminal discharge, where the halacha is that he could purify himself with pouring 3 lugan of water over his head. Meaning, certain types of people, if he's a healthy person versus a sick person, a Talmid Chacham versus whatever. So, a sick person that's a Balkari, Shenasnu Lav Tisha Kavamayim. If you pour over him 9 kav of water, Tahar, he's pure to learn Torah. Because Ezra HaSefer was Masakin at Tefillah for someone that's a Balkari before he should be able to learn Torah. But they were lenient for a sick person that he doesn't have to go into a mikveh. He could take 9 kav of water, even drawn waters, as the Gemara says in Masechet Brachos, and he could pour it over his head. But to become pure, to go into the Beis Hamikdash, that you need to have 40, so you need to go into regular mikveh. But to learn Torah, the Balkari could go ahead and just pour water over his head. Okay. Now, Boyer Papa had the following question. What if Chetzi b'Tefillah? What happens if half of his body goes into the mikveh? The Chetzi b'Nesina. And the other half, they pour 9 kav of water over his head. What's the halacha? The Gemara take a let it stand here. Also, it's not clear. Can you do half and half? Can you do the 9 kav and can you do the mikveh, but halfway? The Gemara says also here, for Tara is also the same question. Okay, that concludes the Gemara's previous discussion regarding this oikuloi. It's got to be either one or the other. And we had certain areas halacha that we had the question, let's say, teifech hamanas latfiach, by natilas yadayim, you do half and half. We didn't answer certain questions if half is going to work. Now, I said in the Mishnah, different cases where multiple people are testifying to the ksiva and the chasima. So we said in the Mishnah, if one person says in front of me was written, and one guy says it's going to be possible. So regarding this case, the Gemara qualifies. Says, Lo Shana, we didn't learn these halachas that they're going to be puzzled, only if the 2 people that are talking, which again we had 3 cases, like the one we just quoted, one says b'fani nechtam, one says b'fani nechtam, or 2 people say b'fani nechtam, one says b'fani nechtam, or one says b'fani nechtam, 2 say b'fani nechtam. So the first 2 we said are going to be puzzled, and Rabbi Yehuda had said regarding the second one that's going to be kosher. So on that Rabbi Yehuda says the halacha was only said when both of them were not shluchin for bringing this get, where both of them are not bringing, it's just one of them is bringing it. Now, halacha is that the one that brings it has to say b'fanei nechtav u b'fanei nechtam. And this guy didn't say it. He said either only b'fanei nechtav or he only said b'fanei nechtam. So therefore, that's when it's going to be possible. Aval get yoytebe. Let's say the get is being produced in the court. B'tachas yidei shneihem, from the hands of both of them, meaning both of them are holding on to it, and they're both agents, which is discussed. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be both to be holding it, but upon them, that's what Rashi says, is that they're both bringing the get. So as a Gitin Daf, if that would be the case that both of them would be bringing it, then kosher, it would be kosher. Because, as Rashi explains, the chiddush in this, that even though he's not really saying anything, because one person has to say both statements, and the reason why you have to say both statements is that you don't come to confuse it with Kim Shtagos de Alma, and here you have only one guy saying, let's say, B'fanei Nechtav, another guy saying only B'fanei Nechtam, so why would it be kosher if both are shluchim? So on that says the Gemara, yes, Rabbi Yochanan in the first version says it's going to be kosher, because Al Muksab we see that he holds. Shnaim sheviu get b'medina sayam, when two people bring the get from overseas, ein tzrichin sheyaimru. They don't have to say b'faneinei nechtam, but b'faneinei nechtam. In front of us, it was written in front of us, sign. Why? So Rashi explains, that's the way Rashi explains, he has all discussion on it, because the whole halacha is because, like Rabbi says, of ein edim mitzuyin l'kaimai, that there's no witness that are going to be around. Now you have edim that are mitzuyin l'kaimai, because two people bring it. Now, if you're going to ask and you're going to say, wait a second, at the end of the day, there are two. Who cares if they're both shluchim? Who cares if one of them is shluchim? But you're telling me that they both recognize their signatures, so you have edim mitzuyin l'kaimai. Let's say the shliach was the one that says b'fanei nechtav. Another one says b'fanei nechtam. So, okay, great, he's not a shliach. But you have two people that are there to verify. So what's the difference? That says Rashi, what's called loy plug. The Rabbanan did not differentiate between whether if he comes with a group of people or whether if he comes by himself, that it's not going to be evident. And if you're going to come to validate this, you're going to come to validate another case. So if it's only one shliach, we're going to say it's possible if he didn't say b'fan nechtam, b'fan nechtam. But when two people are bringing it, the words of Rashi are milsa de muchacha. First of all, it's evident that there is edim mitzuyin l'kaimai, because they're both shluchim. Moreover, another thing Rashi says is lo yishchichahi. It's not common for two people to bring it. And milsa lo yishchicha legaza b'rabban. Rabban were not stringent. They didn't make their gezerah of, oh, maybe the Baal is going to come in ma'ar. We weren't geyser in certain cases. So those are two svaras Rashi brings to tell us why this halacha would be specifically a contrast of two shluchim versus one, even though by the one there's another person. There is two. He might even have 20 people that were along with him. But since he was only shliach, therefore it's going to be a problem versus two. Tais explains that you could even say it's going according to Rabbah. It's because we're talking about shalom and two people also not shliach. And he has a whole discussion. But that's the way Rashi says it. That's talking about that in Rabbi Yochanan, the first version holds like Rav. Now, Amalei Abaya, but Abaya says to this Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, who is saying over this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, he says, wait a second. If that's the case, so wait a second. You told me, says Abaya to him, that when did we learn this whole halacha, the Mishnah in these cases, that let's say one guy says b'fanei nechtam, one guy says b'fanei nechtam, or two say b'fanei nechtam, one says b'fanei nechtam, that's going to be puzzles because only one guy is the shliach. But if two people are the shluchim, so let's say we'll say like Rashi, that it's going like Rava, and then Mitzvah Megamer. Okay, so it's 8 Mitzvah Megamer, so they don't have to say b'fanei nechtam, even though one guy is not saying both statements. It's going to be kosher. Yeah, is that the case? Okay, wait a second, halt cup. If that's the case, let's go to Seifa. Go to the later on the Mishnah, the Tani, we learn the Machlekes Yehuda Rabbanan. The next case. The next case says, Shnaim oimrim b'faneinu nechtav. If two say, so we just discussed the case where one says one and one says the other half of the statement. Let's say two say b'faneinu nechtav. Ve'echarem b'fanei nechtav. One says in front of me was a sign. So the Tani come, the Rabban said puzzle, me puzzle. The Machshir says no. It's going to be kosher. Wait a second. Time and the reason is you just told me that the Mishnah is talking about what? Because the ein get yotzim mitachas idei shnayim. You told me the case is like case number one you were describing is when these two guys or three guys or whatever, they're not all the shluchim, it's just one shliach. Therefore, that's why Talmud it says it's going to be possible. Get yotzim mitachas idei shnayim. But if let's say the get's being produced by both, meaning they're both shluchim, what's going to be the halacha? This case, machshir rabbanan. Rabbanan would say it's going to be valid, even though what they're saying is nothing, because when you can't say half, you have to say the whole b'fanei nechtam. Here, two are saying b'fanei nechtam, nothing with nechtam, and one guy is saying b'fanei nechtam. Now, you're going to say that's okay, because when two people bring the get, you don't need to say anything. But the problem is, so it's not actually not a problem. So, Amalein, Tais actually explains that really this wasn't such a question because, yeah, that's what he would hold. He's saying that it's only because one guy is producing it, one guy is the shliach, that's why it's going to be invalid. But if both of them were shluchim, and the chanami, it would be valid. So Tate just explains that he's leading into the next point that he wants to say. Oh, okay, so wait a second. Okay, so fine. So you're telling me the case of the Mishnah is when it's not both are bringing, because if both would be bringing it, if both would be the shluchim, both giving kusha, because both people bring it. So when it's not both of them that bring it, so the question is, b'mai pliki, what are they disagreeing about? What's the question? So the way Rashi explains the question is, since you're telling me that the case that they're talking about in the second case of the Mishnah is when one person is bringing it, well, whoever this one guy is, he's not saying ketakan chacham, because he's either from the two that are said b'fnei nechtam, or it's the one that is saying b'fnei nechtam. So why does Yehuda say it's going to be kosher? How could it be kosher? Now Taisa explains that when, in other words, when the get is being produced by both of them, so then, as we'll see in the second version of Rabbi Yechanan, that makes sense to Abayim that there would be this machlekes Yehuda and Rabbanan. But the way this first version of Rabbi Yechanan is saying it, that the whole reason why the Rabbanan say it's possible is because it's only one guy that's bringing it, but if two brought it, it would be kosher. So then he finds it difficult in the case of the second case, if it's one guy that's bringing it, how can you say it's kosher? We have only one guy that's saying, this one guy is saying halba statement. So Gemara explains, I'll tell you what the machlekes is. Mar Sava, the Tanakama held that even though the get is being produced from the one guy who's saying b'fanei nechtam, and if that's the shliach, the chachamim believe the shliach like two people. So if that's the shliach, that one guy, the Maisa, he should be believed on the chasimis. And again, we're going like Rava, who holds that the vard is because of kim shtarais, is because ein edim mitzvah l'kaimoi. Even so, since that one guy is not saying osa b'fanei nechtav, it's going to be possible. Why is it going to be possible? Oh, because Gazrina would make a decree. Dilma asti lachlufa b'kim shtarais dialma. You might confuse in general when you're verifying a document that you're going to say, hey, I was once there by a get, and I saw the guy say, he recognized the signatures and they validated the get. So you might come to validate Kim Shaz Alma be'ed echad. Because the whole reason why you say b'fani nechtav, if you recall from the beginning of the Masechta, according to Rava, is that it shouldn't be confused with Kim Shaz Alma. If all we needed to do, which really according to Rava, there's no reason to say b'fani nechtav. According to Rava, the reason is because of the kiyum of the shtaras, which is with the signatures. So the Gemara had asked, according to Rava, he says, yeah, you don't have to say it. So because then it looks just like a regular verification of a document. And people are not going to differentiate between Gitin and Mumminess, and they're going to say, yeah, I was there in Kol Chab Gizain, one person is good enough. That was a get. The only reason they'll realize that is because the guy also said, B'fanei nechtav. What's geschrieben? What is it? Oh, taka Gitin is anders. Oh, Gitin, they believed one person, but not by regular stars dialma. So it says the Gemara, the Tanakama held the reason why it's going to be possible in this case is because you don't have that one guy who we believe like to saying also b'fanei nechtav. So therefore it's going to be invalid. But Amar Rabbi Yehuda held that since you require two other people in his place to testify on the writing, no, like it's doing, we're not going to make it exer because there's no more asal achlufe. Because you're right, he, the shliach, didn't say anything about the writing, but whoever's in court sees that we need two other people to say b'faneinu nechtav. So it's like, well, what's going on over here? Why are two other people coming along and making a saying this whole thing that they saw it? Because Gitin taka, it's different. Oh, okay, fine. It's not going to get confused with Kim Shtal. So the machlekes is regarding would it be asel achlufe in the case of when it's not the edim, when it's not the shlich himself saying b'faneinu nechtav, but you have two other people. Would that be enough to take away the concern of asel achlufe or not? That's the machlekes between the Tanakama and the Rabbanan. So and Rabbi Yehuda. So this is one version of the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan in this halacha. So according to this version of Yechanan, so we said it was referring to one shliach. So therefore, if you go through the cases of the Mishnah, let's say you have echarem b'fanei nechtam, it says it can be possible. Why? Because It's l'shliach atzachur abon lemimenu tavayu. The kula one aid can validate a get was initiated only for the shliach's testimony. So even though we have one person on each part of the statement, that's not going to be valid because again, according to this verse of Yechon, there's only one shliach. So the fact that another guy who's not a shliach says either half of that, it's not going to help us because the shliach himself didn't say on both. According to the second case that we're just discussing right now, when Shnaimam b'fanein nechta be'echadim b'fanein nechta pasal, because that one aid, who according to Rava, which Rashi's explained, Rabbi Yechon is going like, even if he's saying b'fanei nechtam, we believe him like two. So even though it really should be kosher because we actually do believe him like two, problem is he's not saying anything regarding b'fanei nechtam. But Rabbi Yehuda is machshir because he's not a concern for achlufi, the way Rashi explained, because you have two people saying b'fanei nechtam. What do you have two people for? Must be because it's noticeably different in the regular kiyum shtar as the alma. No one's talking about the writing in the regular shtar. And regarding the last case of when one says b'fanei nechtam and two people say b'fanei nechtam kosher, so that we're going to describe in a second that there's no concern for chalufe because since there are two edim for the chasima, which is acceptable even for shar shtaras, so of course not going to run into any problems over there. That's all according to the first version of Yechon. Says the Gemara, Lishna Achrina Amrila. We have a second version of the teaching of Yechon, which is exactly the opposite. Amr of Shmuel by Yehuda, Amr by Yechonon. So again, the same Rabbi Shmuel by Yehuda and name of Yechonon, but the opposite version. Afil get yoytz mitachas yedei shnehem. Possible is going to be possible. Meaning, the first version had said that the whole halacha of our Mishnah was only gesagt when you have one shliach. And then he's saying either one half or the other half, and then you have other people that are being involved, but they're not the shluchim. But so Rabbi Yochanan did both shluchim. Yeah, it's going to be kasha. Why is it going to be kasha? Because it has zwei mentioned, that's zwei eidem. The whole point was because of ein eid mitzvah l'kayim a host item. You don't have to say anything, so it's going to be kasha. Second version says no. Even if you have two shluchim, yeah, it's still going to be possible in these cases of the Mishnah. Why would it be possible? You have two people. Says the Gemara, Al Maksaver Shnaim Shaviu Get, the Medina Siyam. Obviously, that this version holds that when two people bring a get from overseas, yeah. You still have to say and here they didn't say it the way the Chum instituted that both of them have to say this. Because since only one is testifying on the signatures, okay, because he's not saying anything regarding the ksiva. So this version holds that no, even when both are shluchim, it's going to be possible. So Amalei Abaya, which is really like Rabbah. Rabbah holds that you're going to have two. Even when two are bringing, you still have to say b'fanei nechtam, because again, this still doesn't tell us anything regarding lishma. So Amalei Abaya asks on this version also. Wait a second. If that's the case, let's go to the next case. Sefer the Gitin, the middle case. We call it the Sefer, the one afterwards. The Gitin that we learned, a machlokes. If two say in front of us, it was written. Once and in front of me was signed, possibly puzzle. Rabbi Yehuda says it's going to be kasher. Now, l'chayra, it's going to be similar to the first case that, like you're explaining to me, that even though the get here is being produced, there's a shliach on both of them, still pas Rabbanan. Rabbanan said it's going to be invalid because they have to say b'faneinu nechtam and mezucht gunisht, because you're not saying both halves of the statement. Because if, let's say, the get is being produced from let's say the two people that are saying b'faneinu nechtam are the two shluchim. So obviously the one guy on the b'fanei nechtam, he's not saying anything because he's not a shliach at all. And the non-shliach won't believe one guy. And if, let's say, from these three people, the two shluchim is one guy that says on the b'fanei nechtam, and it's the one guy from the b'fanei nechtav, or let's say all three are shluchim. But since on the chasima, only one guy is testifying, and he's not talking about the kesiva, okay, it's asal achlufe again. Because even though they're all shluchim, but there's only one guy on the chasim, and he's not saying anything regarding the kesiva. So it looks like that, like a regular kim shtachis, and you see one guy's doing the validation of the chasima. So on that says Abaya to Rabbi Shmuel bar Yehuda, he says, is that really so? That the Chacham are going to say in this middle case that even though 2 guys are or 3 guys are the shluchim, still they can say it's going to be possible? Amalei in, he says, yeah, it's going to be possible. Says the Gemara, but my kamiflagi. In other words, then why is Rabbi Yehuda saying it's going to be kosher? L'chayra, it should be possible because asalach lufe became shtachas di alma. Now it's funny because Taisus actually asks. He says, "Well, the Gemara gives a whole different answer. It's going to bring in Rabba and Rava now." And Taisus says, "Well, why didn't you say the same thing you said in the first version? Lishna Rishon, the first version of Rabbi Yechanan's teaching, you said the machlek is regarding if you're concerned for asalach lufe or not, because the Maisa you have people saying on the ksiva." So it's not asalach lufi because you see something else going on. Why don't we say the same thing we said in the first version? So the Ri says that no. According to the first version, you could say that the reason of Rabbi Yehuda is because he's not concerned for asalach lufi, because since the get is only being produced through there's only one shliach, the Eida Chasima, so it's obvious that we believe the Eida Chasima by himself because he's the shliach of the get. And from the fact that we require 2 people is on the ksiva is because they weren't shluchim. So that way you'll actually chap that, must be. Wait, why do you need 2 on the ksiva and 1 on the chasima? Because we believe this one guy. Why is he better than those 2 people? Because the shliach. That's actually what we believe is machshir, because you're not going to come to confuse with shtaris di alma. You'll know that why over here you believe this one guy. Why? If you believe one guy, so why need 2 people on the ksiva? Plus the opposite 2 mentioned. Ksiva is me'achomah in the chasima? No, because this one guy in the chasima is the shliach. Mizayin is not stam that you believe usually one person. Because by Gitin, they believe the shliach. So therefore, you're not going to come to confuse. But according to this version, that he's explaining that actually the get is being produced by both of them or 3 of them, then actually there's a concern of asalach lufa because now there's no mahoichach anymore. Because the guy who's testifying on the writing is also shliach from the get. So this says the Gemara couldn't answer like it said in the first version that Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned about asalach lufa. There actually is egg in our version that he would agree asalach lufa. No. Okay, the first version says that the halach of the Mishnah was with 1, but if 2 brought it, then you wouldn't have to say, and therefore would be kosher. The second version of Rabbi Yechanan is saying that no, even when the get is being produced by 2 people, the halach of our Mishnah still applies. That's going to be possible because the Lamaisa, they didn't say the whole before the nachta, they didn't say the whole thing. Therefore, it's going to be possible because even 2 people bringing it have to say it. But one case, Rabbi Yehuda says kosher when 2 people say b'fanein nachtav and 1 says b'fanein nachtam. So the question is, what's kosher? Why is it kosher? Right? It should be a problem. So Taisa says, well, why don't you answer that the machlek is regarding asalach lufi, like he said in the first version. Chacham are concerned about asalach lufi, and Rabbi Yehuda does not. So it says you can't say that because the first version makes more sense to say that it's not concerned about asalach lufi because it's only one guy that's bringing it. And then why do you need 2 people to say b'fanei nachtav? Because they're not shluchim. If you're not a shliach, like by regular kim shtar zam, you need to have 2. Here we believe him because he's a shliach. That was the first version. But the second version, that they're all shlichim, both or 3 of them are shluchim, then there's no mahichach anymore. Because the first guy, b'fanei nachtav, also needs 2. So you don't have that chacha. Therefore, Taisus just answers why. If you're wondering why in the second version suddenly we're coming to the whole shtickle Torah Andrish, is because Taisus says you couldn't say what we said in the first version. So then, what's the machlekes? Why is Rita saying it's kosher in this second case? Says the Gemara, Marsav, the Tanakama held that the reason why that you have to say b'fanei nachtav l'vishein b'kiin lishma, because when you're bringing from the Nizam, they're not well versed in the halach of lishma. So when 2 people bring a get, or 3 people, whatever it is, you have to say. And now they didn't say v'madav zogen, because no one person said b'fanei nachtav. You have 2 people saying b'fanei nachtav, and 1 guy saying b'fanei nachtav. You guys weren't good shluchim. Two guys saw the writing, one guy saw the signing. This is not good enough. We need to take responsibility that someone saw the whole thing. But Amar Savar, Behuda held that no, oh, so two people bring a get, you don't have to say anything. We're not bothered by that, because you have the two Adam right here that are bringing it. Therefore, that's the machlekes regarding this case of when you have 2 or 3 people, that you're not going to have to, according to read, it's going to be kosher because daf gunish zugen. You have to say because lishma. Says the Gemara. Wait a second. Lema de Rabba Tanoi. So just to say that this grace of machlekes amaram that everyone in Masechta Gitin is known for, machlekes Rabba is not really machlekes amaram. It's really machlekes Tanoim. You see the halacha of our Mishnah. You described machlekes Yehuda and the Chachamim regarding if the reason is because of Bekin Lishma or because of Eid Mutzun Lekama. Says Gemara, no. Rava Metaretz Kalishna Kama. Rava will explain that the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, which is qualifying the halacha of our Mishnah, which will then verify to us what's the machlekes of the Tanoim, is like the first version. What was the first version of Rabbi Yochanan? That the get is not being produced by both of those. It's actually one shlich, not 2 shluchim. Because if both would bring it, actually everyone would hold, not only Rabbi Yehuda, even the Chachamim, that it'd be kosher. Because you don't need a have. Why? Because the whole reason is because ein edem mitzvah l'kaimai. If both would be the shluchim, then says Rava, everyone would agree that it'd be kosher. But over here we're talking about like the first version of Yechanan, there's only one shliach. He's the one that's testifying on the chasima, the b'fanei nechtam. Therefore, it's going to be apostle because you don't have you have this asla chlufe. Now, the reason Rabbi Yehuda is like we mentioned before, that since you need 2 others on the ksiva, it's lo asla chlufe. So that, according to Rava, is why everyone's like him, because it's not a case of 2 shluchim; it's 1 shliach. But for Rabba, he would explain to you like the Lishna Basra, like the second version of Yechanan we just quoted. And Amalach, he would tell you, no, the Kul Amma being Lishma. Everyone holds that the reason why you need to say B'fanei Nachtav is because that you need to know it's done Lishma. But over here, the Yehuda says going to be kosher, which makes Madna, why, according to why it would be kosher. Chayr, that's like Rava, because you have 2 people, so you don't have to say. Because you have to say, well, no one's saying the whole B'fanei Nachtav. No, it's not because when 2 people bring a get, you don't have to say B'fanei Nachtav. Rather, it's because b'ma'iskin, what are we talking about over here? La'acher shalamdu. We mentioned this concept on Daf Hey already, that there's a concept that at a certain point in time, the people in Medina Zayam are osgeleren, and they knew the halacha of Lishma. So what are you concerned about? Regarding Lishma? But they already learned the halacha of Lishma. If it's because of Lakaimai, which we know Rabba Islay de Rava, is he also concerned? You have, because you have 2 people. Now, so then what's the machlekes then? If it's la'ach shalamdu, why Chama say it's going to be possible? Because the machlekes is regarding, are we then concerned that things are going to go back to the ways that when they were messed up? The Marsa by the Rabban whole Gezrina, we make a decree that maybe things are going to go back to the way they used to be, and therefore, even though they already are la'ach shalamdu, you still need to say b'fanei nechtam. And since you're not having that, that's it, pusel. But Rabbi Yehuda Saber, he holds, like we don't make such a gezerah. And the reason why you don't make such a gezerah, says Rashi, is because when 2 people bring a get, it's a milsa lo shchicha. It's not common for 2 people to bring a get. It's a shud of the geld. 1 guy delivery, you have 2 delivery guys, right? So that's lo shchicha. So the Rabbanan are not geyser in the milsa lo shchicha. So even if you're going to say, the way Rashi makes it sound like that, we would be geyser, and we still require b'fanei nachtav by 1 shliach, but 2 shluchim, we're not going to make the gezerah because of milsa lo shchicha. And by an uncommon case, Rabbanan never instituted their gezerahs. So therefore, Yehuda says it's going to be kosher. So again, we show that Rabba and Rabba doesn't have to be machlekes hanoim. Rava will say like the Lishna Kama, and Rabba will say like the Lishna Basra. That's how they'll explain each for their opinions that all the Tanaim could hold like them. But then says the Gemara, wait a second. If that's the case, the first case that we said, when one says b'fanei nechtav and one says b'fanei nechdam, since both are the shluchim both are producing it if you say like the Lishna Basra, which we're explaining for Rabbo, which was the second version of Rabbi Yechanan. So there's no more concern about Lekaima because you have two people. There's also no concern about Lishma because La'acha Shalamdu, and there's also no concern for Kilkel because the Milsal Shchicha, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So why is Yehuda only disagreeing in the second case? He's disagreeing in the first case too. Says the Gemara, yeah, ha'itmal, and we already mentioned this in Rashi in the Mishnah, that you're right, we said on this, that Ama'ula Chalikah Rabbi Yehuda af B'Rishayna. You're right, Rabbi Yehuda disagreed in the first case too, because that's the same principle. When you have two people, you don't have to say B'vanei Nechtam v'Nechtam. So the fact that one guy says B'vanei Nechtam, one guy says B'vanei Nechtam, is no different than Shnayim are B'vanei Nechtav, and Echad are B'vanei Nechtam, because the two guys they're bringing are both Shluchim, and there's Acha Shalamdu. There's no concern about Yachid Dabakukula because the Milsal Shchicha would not look as a Barabanan. And regarding Kim, the Rabbi, the Rabbi, well, we have because you have two people. But Masr Rav Oishi Ula. But this teaching that Ula said that Yehuda disagrees in the first case too, Rav Oishi asked on Ula from the following Brisa. Brisa says the following words: Rabbi Yehuda machshe bezu v'loy ba'acheres. We have in the Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda is machshe in the second case. And we have the Brisa says, oh, in this case, but not in another case. Says, my level of muta, isn't it that he's coming to exclude echarem b'fanei nechtam echarem b'fanei nechtam? Isn't it sounds like he's coming to explicitly exclude that the first case, he doesn't hold that it's kosher. Not like what Ula just said. Says, no, that's not what he's coming to say. It's l'muta, it's coming to exclude b'fanei nechtam avalei b'fanei nechtav. Another one of the cases of the Mishnah was, if the shliach only says in front of me was signed, but it doesn't say in front of me it was written. When you have one person, oh, that's possible because we make a gezerah because that's the maslach lufa b'kim shtachas yalma. You have one guy just testifying on the signature. Well, that looks like regular kim shtachas, and he's not saying b'fanei nechtav. So why are we coming to exclude that case? So you would have thought to say, since Rabbi Yehuda does not make the decree of that maybe things are going to go back to the old ways. So if that's the case, maybe he also not gazer the idea of maybe you're going to confuse it with Kim Shtaras the Alma. And maybe he would actually validate it even in the case of Echad Oima B'fanei Nechtam. You can see he's not choshev with that gezer, maybe thinking something over here. That's why I have to say that no, that case he would hold that we are gazer of Asla Chlufa B'Kim Shtaras the Alma. And that's the chiddush that we said he's machshir bezu v'lebeches, but it's not excluding the first case because actually he's machshir in the first case also, not just in the second case. Says the Gemara, Itmanam, we also learned like the Lishna Basar of Rabbi Yechanan, that when the get is being produced by both them, they're both the shluchim, then actually it's over there that's the machlek. Meaning not like the first version. The first version had said that the machlek is only regarding when one is a shliach, but when both the shliach, then actually everyone's going to agree it's going to be kosher. Second version of Rabbi Yechanan says no. It's actually, it's even by two people that you have to say b'fanei nechtam, whether it's going to be possible. Where do we learn this? Because the teaching says clearly, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Shnayim shaviu get memedin sayam. When two people bring a get from overseas, banu l'machlekes yiridu rabbanan. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that the machlekes yiridu rabbanan, our Mishnah, is going to be not only when one person brings it, and then you have other people that just happen to be around with him. It's even when two people bring it. Now the Gemara brings some stories related to this halacha that Rabbi Babachana Chalash, he wasn't feeling well. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi came to ask how he's doing. So once they're there, of course, Mahalt and learning. So and they had this from Rabbi Gershon Edels, they have this Bavast, we got to them with the last minute, the land and Torah, we come to, Vaka Chayla, a Gudel. So they had the following question for him. Shnaim Shavi get Medin Sayam. So two people that bring a get from overseas, do they have to say in front of it was written, in front of it was signed, or do they not have to? Let me say, they don't have to. Why not? Because if, imagine they would say, she was divorced in front of us, wouldn't they be believed? So they don't have to say anything. So you don't have to because it's like Kim Shtaras the Alma. Now, Adahachi, in the meantime, Asahu, as we continue to Gitin Daf Aleph, Chavra. So this whole discussion, Rashi and Tais, exactly who these Chabodim are. Rashi says Parsoim, Persians. Tais explains a little bit more specific of a subcategory of people. Be that as it may, they were difficult people. So shaklu l'shroga mikamayum. So they took away the lamp that was in front of them, because as Rashi explains that the Persians had a holiday that you're not allowed to light any lamp on that day, only in their house of their idol. So they came in, the Chayla, the Rosh Hashivas, and they're talking, and they chapta vek the lample. So Amar, so Rabbi Buchana said, Rachmana, Hashem, the merciful one, oy b'toilach, either conceal us in your shade, oy b'toil devar Esav, or in the shade of the sons of Esav, which they at least honor us, not here by the Persians or these Chabarim, they're wicked people. Says Gemara, remember that to say that the Romans are better, that's the descendants of Esav, are better than the Persians? But taught a brisa that says, it wasn't in the pasuk in Iyam. Elikim haven darka, God understood her path, meaning of the Torah and those who learned the Torah. And he knew its place, meaning where it's appropriate that the Jews should settle, that they should be able to learn Torah. So what does the pasuk mean? God knew regarding the Jewish people, they can't sustain, they can't withstand the decrees of the Romans, all the gzeres shmad, that they shouldn't learn Torah, shouldn't fulfill the mitzvahs. So we know the first Gullus from the Beis Hamikdash was in Gullus Bavel by the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So we see that the Romans were the most difficult. So why are you saying that you want to go where the Romans are, to the sons of Esav, because you're fed up with the Persians? Says it's not difficult, it depends. When did we say that Bavel was better? Was before the Chabari, which are these groups that we're talking about, these Chavarim, these Persians, that in the days of the Kazdim, Nebuchadnezzar, Evel Merodach, Belshazzar, that's when the Jews were there in Golas Bavel, that was better. But once these Chabari came to Bavel, once Kirish conquered the kingdom and he ruled in Bavel, then it would be better by the Romans than it would be by the Persians, by these Chabarim, and therefore he says, Rabbi Shalom, please, Ginig Shem with this, we can't learn in peace. I would rather be by the Bnei Esav than we are by the Bnei Chabari. I think it should be Zechet to the Gula Shleimah.